So for the second part of 9.3, we will be solving quadratic equations using square roots. So there's an example right here. If you think about x squared equals 81, and you are solving for x, to undo a squared, you square root both sides. Square rooting x squared just gives you x. Now this is important. Most of you know the square root of 81 is 9, but we are going to call it plus or minus 9, which means it could be positive 9. It could also be negative 9. If you think back to the graphs that we just did, some of them had two solutions where it was the positive and the negative. So for this one, if we graphed it, the graph would cross the x-axis at positive 9 and negative 9. So you need to make sure when you take the square root that you do write plus or minus. So let's try an example here. Notice that it is set equal to 0, which means we are looking for the solutions. Your goal is to get m by itself. So the first step would be to add 36 to the other side. That way we cancel it on this side. We are left with m squared equals positive 36. So to undo the squared, I must square root both sides. In doing that, I get m by itself, and square rooting 36 gives me plus or minus 6, which means I have two solutions. One is positive 6 and one is negative 6. So once again, if you're thinking about the graph of this equation, it would cross your x-axis at 6 and negative 6. Let's try this one here. Our goal is to get x by itself. So first step would be to add 75 to both sides. That cancels it here. We are left with 3x squared equals 75. Go ahead and divide by our 3. So x squared equals 25. That is 75 divided by 3. And then now to undo my squared, I would square root both sides. So my solution here is plus or minus 5. Plus or minus 5. Okay, once again, if I was going to graph this, it would cross the x-axis at positive 5 and at negative 5. Let's try a couple more. If you notice on this one, it's actually not set equal to 0. We could go ahead, I'll do this work on the side, we could go ahead and get it set equal to 0 by subtracting the 16 over to this side. Okay, that way we would get a 0 on this side. But if you notice, that's actually happening on both sides. I am subtracting 16, so it's going to cancel on both sides. So when I do that, I do get 4d squared equals 0. It is now equal to 0, and I can continue solving for d. So I can divide by 4, which 0 divided by 4 is 0. Now when you think about square rooting 0, 0 does not have plus or minus, so this actually would be d equals 0. If you think about the graphs that we just did, this means that it has one solution right on your vertex of 0, 0. D is 0. Okay, one solution here, it's just 0. Let us try this one. So solving for x, I would subtract 16 from both sides. That cancels it here, so I get 4x squared equals negative 16. You can divide by 4 now. X squared equals negative 4. Now, if you tried to square root this, you would get an error in your calculator because you cannot square root a negative number. So if you ever get to x squared where it's isolated equals a negative number, this is no solution. This is no solution. Make a note to yourself that you cannot square root a negative number. So if you're thinking about your graph, this means that if I graphed this one, it doesn't cross the x-axis anywhere. Does not cross the x-axis. So you can't square root a negative number, so this one is no solution. At this point, go ahead and pause your video. Try these 3 examples to solve for the solutions, and then hit play to check yourself. All right, so in checking yourself, for the first one, you should have got plus or minus 4. Make sure when you square root 16, you do get plus or minus 4, which means you have two possible solutions. One is positive 4 and one is negative 4. For your second problem, you should have gotten down to x equals 0, which is just one solution. There's no plus or minus 0, just 0. And on the last one, you should have got down to x squared equals negative 16, which means no solution because you cannot square root a negative number. So now would be the time to write down any questions that you had about this lesson, both parts, whether it was solving by graphing or solving by taking the square roots, and you can complete the homework in class.